Hello and welcome to Comic Book School. We have a really big event today, and I have to tell you, I am super excited. Not only is our guest a talented and well-known comic book creator, he's also a personal friend. And he is the best person to start this off with because he will be able to move with the agility of the conversation because we're kind of doing this for the first time. For those of you who have joined me at Comic Cons, especially New York Comic Con, you know my next guest, but you know how we like to review scripts and really try to break down how that script will work. We're going to put a little twist on that by utilizing a script from one of our members who's working on our current 8-page challenge. And I think you guys will find it really interesting as Jamal and I talk about the script, the format, the story, and then Jamal will break down one of the pages and demonstrate exactly how he would illustrate it. Now, before we go any further, I keep saying Jamal. I'm going to have to introduce him. Jamal Igle is an American writer, comic book illustrator, editor, and animation storyboard artist whose experiences have taken him all across the field of sequential arts. The 30-plus year industry veteran began his career at the age of 17 when his time at the High School of Art and Design led him to a chance internship with DC Comics. Following his passion, Igle studied at New York City School of Visual Arts, after which he would hone his talents in advertising agencies, small comic publishers, and even the field of animation, contributing storyboards to series such as Max Steel, Roughnecks, Starship Trooper Chronicles with Sony Animation. Entering the world of mainstream comics with a 4-issue run on New Warriors for Marvel Comics, Jamal's detail-rich pencils would come to grace the pages of G.I. Joe, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Green Lantern. He's been a series mainstay for household DC comic names such as Nightwing, Firestorm, Zatanna, and Supergirl. His run on Supergirl with fellow writer Sterling Gates is in particular credited as a major inspiration for the CW's 2015 Supergirl television series. A recipient of the 2011 Inkpot Award for Outstanding Achievement in Comic Art, Jamal currently works in the world of independent comics, lending his talent and experience to titles such as the critically acclaimed miniseries Black and his creator-owned graphic novel series, Molly Danger. Please give a warm Comic Book School welcome to my friend and comic book pro, Jamal Igle.
Hey, buddy, how are you?
It is great to see you, and I did that all out of memory, Jamal.
I appreciate it.
I have to give credit. One of our members, Bolu, wrote it for us, and he did a great job. He really researched. We were all very excited, and everybody volunteered to help out. So we have a whole bunch of people really excited to hear you speak tonight.
Oh, thanks. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to talk to young budding creators.
Well, you always do it for me at Comic-Con, and I think one of the great things about what you do at Comic-Con is, you're busy at the con, you're networking, you've got a table, and yet you always make time for young budding creators. Why do you in the chaos of Comic-Con where you have to make money and network, why do you make time for the panels that I run at New York Comic-Con? What draws you to it?
Well, you know what the big thing is I always think back to when I was up and coming, like when I was like 17, 18, 19 years old. I was very lucky. You mentioned the internship that I did at DC Comics. That was sort of like, that wasn't really my first foray into getting to know creators, but that was the first time that I had seasoned professionals, people who knew what they were doing, kind of looking over my shoulder and giving me the straight dope about what I needed to do in order to take that next step as a creator. And sort of the same thing when I would go to conventions, I would meet people like Keith Giffen, I would meet people like Bernie Wrightson, I would meet people like Randy Stradley, and everybody would take the time because I think partially because I showed that I was willing to pay attention and I was willing to listen to their advice, and I would go back to them all the time and show them a new set of samples. And I would, say to editors, I would send editors stuff all the time, not always necessarily to get work, but to improve, to see what I was missing, what was keeping me from making that next step. And over the years, then all my experiences of going to conventions, I would see the same people coming back to me year after year, showing me their new stuff. And eventually, in some cases, hey, I got this gig. Hey, I'm doing this series. Let's hang out. Let's, I mean, that's how I met Chris Dabari. Chris Dabari used to come up to me at shows, and then suddenly he's doing horror comics and doing his own thing. And then, same thing with Steve Walker and just a bunch of other guys. So, I always believe in paying it forward, because I had that gift given to me as a young creator.
Jamal, we were young when we were both breaking in. I mean, we were around the same time, and I remember you coming out of the gate with work for Blackjack.
Yeah.
And I was like I thought you were going to be so much older. Like, the work was really mature. It didn't look like new creator work. And then I was like, oh, he's my age. Like, and I was so impressed with the work, and your work is incrementally continued to grow. And I know you're a real student of the medium. How do you stay fresh? How do you stay vibrant? And how do you continue to improve your craft?
Well, I mean, I'm constantly working, and I think that's a big part of it. But the other thing I think that works for me, it doesn't work for everybody, is that I try to keep myself open in terms of everything, in terms of film and television and comics and novels and everything. I mean, it helps to have a almost teenage daughter, because I'm getting introduced to new stuff all the time. But, I think that a lot of times what happens with some creators, especially older creators, is that you kind of get frozen at a certain period creatively. Like you only like the stuff that you grew up on.
Yeah.
You only like the stuff that appeals directly to the same things that you were always into. I love looking at new talent. I love looking at the up and coming comic book artists, because they're doing stuff that I would love to be able to do. And then I'm trying to teach myself how to do, especially as we, march closer and closer to an age where everything's going to be digital, from pencils all the way down to production. I mean, I'm kind of halfway there, because a lot of what I do in terms of color and production on my own work is digital, working in Photoshop and working in InDesign and working in Illustrator. But I still pencil traditionally. I'm teaching myself to ink digitally. I'm teaching myself. The curve is a little bit harder for me, being, a relatively older guy, but I am willing to learn. And I think that's the big part of it, is that I try to keep things fresh.
Well, I do want to touch on something you did say, and I think this is a true testament to your agility in the business. You've worked in marketing, you've been a writer, you've been an artist, you've worked in animation, and I think you recognize that if you just stay at the one thing, you're only ever going to have this one skill set. You've managed to build a multifaceted skill set, and it seems to serve you really well. Now you're working over with the Ahoy team, Empire, and again, you're generating, I think, enthusiasm for the work that you're doing, in part because all these other things, these other facets of the business. And I think one of the things we try to teach our comic book school students is it is a business.
Right.
Could you just talk a little bit about your mindset of how you approach your career, and any advice for our students before we get into the script portion?
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, if we're talking just simply from the artistic point of view, I purposely try to cultivate a visual style and a look that could be adapted to any genre. So, and everything that I've done superheroes, I've done horror, I've done classics illustrated type books, I've done slice of life stuff. I've worked in animation, I've done storyboards, I've done, I did storyboards and concept boards for direct to consumer advertising for a medical company. So. And I think, again, that goes along with that same kind of idea. I think part of it is my initial training from like high school straight through college. I started, as an illustration student. I took comics in high school and in college, but I also had a classically trained illustration background as well, and I think that really helped my versatility. In terms of everything else, like, I started as an intern at DC. I had no interest in getting into editorial, and I just kind of fell into it, and I enjoyed it for that aspect. And I think that helped my writing, but it also helped me to understand the nuts and bolts of what it takes to put a comic book together, in terms of scheduling, in terms of my responsibilities to the rest of the creative team. If I didn't have that experience, I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be able to do a lot of things. I would not be able to do the scheduling. I wouldn't be able to be a writer. I mean, I had, like, as you know, one of the things that I ended up doing was being the marketing director for a comic book company for 3 years. I just kind of found myself into, falling into these worlds because I had all this other stuff that I had going on outside of comics as well, working for Gray and, doing all this other, working for the Hatherley Company and, working for Inventive and Edelman and, everything else. And just, I think the biggest piece of advice that I can give in terms of that is that if you leave yourself open to the possibilities, if you allow yourself to be open to the opportunities that are presented to you, you never know what you're going to end up doing. I fell into doing storyboards. That was never my intention. That came honestly as sort of like, I'll tell you real quick. I basically got into doing storyboards because I saw an ad in the back of Animation Magazine at Barnes and Noble, and I called the number at Sony.
Did you buy the issue, or did you just dial the number?
I bought the issue, but I called them, and they sent me the test for Starship Troopers. I did the test, mailed it back to them. This is before emailing and scanning and everything. Mailed it back to them. They called me and said, "We've got a job for you, but you have to be out here in a week." So I picked up and I went to California.
Oh my God! Wow.
So again, that's what I mean. You if you keep yourself open to the opportunities.
But you also got to want it, right? Like,
yeah, that's true too.
You got to want it. Like, if you're ready to pick up and move to Cali, you've got to want it because you're in New York.
Yeah,
I think it's worth noting we're on the East Coast. That's a major,
It was a
right?
I was, renting and sharing a 3-bedroom apartment. I was only expecting to be out there for 6 weeks. I ended up out there for a year and a half. So
not bad. Well, listen, I mean, it obviously worked out well.
Yeah.
You've had a charmed career, and everything looks to be continuing. I mean, I read your comic. I think it's great. I love your art. I've always loved your art, and I've always loved what you do as an educator. So I'm going to just take this moment to pivot and let Aaron know that we're going to pull up the script. Now, for people who are joining us a little bit late, we're running an 8-page challenge as part of the comic book school. Last year, we ran an 8-page challenge and won an award for Best Anthology. I'm sure Aaron will throw that up there from the Comic Book Insider Group and Comic Book Advocates. So we're very excited. So now we're running another one, Jamal.
Okay.
There you go. Our Anthology of the Year. We won Anthology of the Year, and one of our stories won for Best Story. So we're super excited. So we decided to do number 2. It's part of Creator Connections. You can see it's called Creator Connections Panel 1. Our next one will be Creator Connections Panel 2. So this script is going to be part of Creator Connections Panel 2. And the way the creators do it, Jamal, is they're given a writing prompt. And the writing prompt was time in with 2 N's, as in an in, right?
Right.
And no further instructions. And they were guided to go to the message boards, post their idea, then post their plot breakdown, then post their script. What we
Right.
have here, Jamal, is a script. He's been getting active feedback from the community the whole time. But this will be the first professional feedback that he has received. He's aware that you'll be giving him the pros, the cons, and guidance on what to do next, and also that you've thumbnailed a page for him. Does that all sound good? Any other questions, any other thoughts before we jump in?
No, I'm good to go. Let's do this.
All right. So, Aaron, if you don't mind, can you begin to pull up the script? And I'll note to everybody who is watching now, you can go to comicbookschool.com. There is a post with Jamal's face on it, and it includes this script. If you wanted to follow along, there's a downloadable PDF. Okay, we may be having a script challenge. So if I have to, I can pull mine up in a second or two. Let me see if I have the ability to share. Oh, there it is.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, so this will be a little hard to see. Aaron, if actually there's no value to going, you can actually see. There you go. So we start off with a script. It is for an 8-page story. I'll start the conversation, Jamal, just to get the pacing going. I like the story. I have some questions at the end. It was a little unclear, but my gut initial reaction was I was a little taken aback by the formatting. It just kind of didn't look great.
Right.
And I think presentation matters. I think when an editor opens a package and it looks good, I would have wanted this writer to have a cover page written by, contact information, and doesn't matter if it's just going to us.
Right.
You never know when a script is going to be forwarded along. So what were your initial thoughts as you just cracked it open and just started to take a look?
Well, my initial thoughts was I like the concept of the story. A lot of my problems were pacing issues, and then how it was being formatted. So, like on the first page, for example, you have this large panel is panel 1, which is an establishing shot, or at least what's supposed to be an establishing shot of the cityscape. My problem is that there was too much space for that first panel. That's not your establishing shot. Panel 2, to me, is your establishing shot. So you'd use a smaller panel 1 and then a larger panel 2, because originally the way that he had it laid out was panel 1 was going to take up 2/3 of the page, which didn't make any sense. And then all the important information about the setup for the story takes place in 3 smaller panels. That just doesn't work. You want this one shot of the come inside the time in, to be your establishment. That's, we are establishing where the story is taking place. So that would be the panel. Sorry, I dropped my version.
I actually didn't pick up on that. I think that's a really great point, and I didn't pick up on the way that you would have paced it. Now, if you were about to draw this, would you take this into your hands and just take it out of the stage direction, because you're like, actually 1 should be and then 2 should be bigger? Is that how you might approach it?
No, it depends. It depends on the writer. Some writers are more flexible about that kind of thing, but usually I try, if I want to make a change like that, I would talk to them first, or at the very least, I would do a thumbnail version to sort of, prove my theory was the correct one in this case. But again, the same thing. With panel 3 and 4, I would want that to be 2 equal-sized panels, running maybe the third of the page, make them slightly larger, because you've already established what this sign is going to be outside the time in, right?
And what I thought was interesting, and I don't think it's on page 2 either, Jamal. I don't recall. Aaron, could you just leap to page 2 real quick? There was no dialogue on the first page, and I was curious if that was intentional. He intends to fill in the dialogue later. When I write a page and there's no dialogue, I will note, there's no dialogue. This way the artist isn't trying to trap space for when I decide to write dialogue, and also didn't let me know where credits box would go. I always try to indicate where the credits box will go. And I think he dropped it to the last page, which I tend to not like.
Well, I don't have a problem with it being. I personally don't have a problem with it being on the last page, but the credits being on the last page, because you have a lot of real estate on the last page that I felt like wasn't being used as well as it could be. But we can get to that a little bit later in the conversation. Now we go back to page 2. Now here's my problem. There's two problems. The first problem is the dialogue issue, which is the way that he has the dialogue numbered on each page. You keep going back between 1 and 2, and that messes a lot of letterers up, because letterers like to have the dialogue numbered in order. So you start, in this case, instead of going 1, 2, 1, 2, it should be 1 through 8. And that's how, if I were the editor, that's how I would be laying the balloons down, so that the letterer knows where I want the balloons to go, as opposed to going back and forth on it. The other thing was that I found very confusing is the concept of this page being 2 panels.
I went through the same thing. I was like, wait, is it panel? And then because he had panel 1 lowercase, right? And then panel 2 all uppercase. And I'm like, wait, is this panel? I was getting confused too. So again, the formatting started to make me struggle a little bit as well. I was like, why is that? Like, how many actions are on panel 1?
There's a lot going on in panel 1, and I just sort of felt like we had not earned that idea. It's a very clever thing that he wants his artists to do, but not every artist would be capable of doing it. And the other problem that I have is, one of my big tenets when I'm laying out a story is that clarity is everything. Clarity overall. I need, unless I am purposely doing something, a layout that is meant to confuse, not even just confuse the reader, but be jarring to the reader visually. You don't do stuff like this. This is, it kind of reads almost like one of those old Family Circus cartoons where you kind of want to have like Jeffrey walking through with like a little trail following behind him, where he's supposed to be like leaping over the couch and everything and going into the elevator. So that was my big issue. And this is one of those things that I would ultimately end up talking to the writer about, in this case, Dave. I would end up talking to him about and say to him, look, this doesn't work as it is, because you need to establish spaces here. And I know what you want to do, but there's no way to get that movement from one side of the page to the other and have it make sense to the reader.
It's what I hear you saying, and tell me if I'm putting words into your mouth. If not, this idea of a Z pattern is like a special effect, right? In a movie, special effects are expensive, and special effects need to have meaning. He's asking for what I thought was like, why is he asking for this? Is this going to matter later? Same thing with the elevator question. I felt like, look, you have 8 pages. The dialogue's got to be sharp. It's got to be meaningful, and you have to trim every bit of fat out in 8 pages. It's merciless. I saw this as like an unnecessary special effect. I'm like, what are we doing?
It's a bit much. It's a bit much. I think I don't really mind the dialogue so much, or even like the whole elevator thing, because we're meeting Morgan for the first time, or at least kind of getting to know Morgan for the first time. You need to sort of establish her hesitancy. She's never been in here before. The whole idea behind the time in is that I guess it's sort of like a time dilation chamber where you're supposed to squeeze in all this extra activity that you're supposed to be doing, so that you can spend more time with your family, which is it's a clever idea. It really is. One of my other issues also is that I felt like, and this would be another case where, I would break up the first panel into 4 panels. So you have Morgan and the attendant. We'll see. This was the page that I chose to lay out, so we'll see it later. But then I also added another panel at the end of the page to establish this new setting that she's going to. And that's the thing, is whenever you change a scene in a story, you need to reestablish where the characters are. There always needs to be an establishing shot. And since I didn't want to take away from the 4 panels that he had laid out on page 3, because he has a very specific idea for how he wants that cadence to go, that beat structure with that page of Morgan on the couch. So I added an establishing shot, a small establishing shot.
Do you want to? Should we go to 3 now? Yeah, let's jump to 3. Go ahead.
So Morgan enters left frame. I actually really didn't have too much of a problem with the setup for the setup for this page, because it leads directly into the next scene, which is fine. It's the 4 panels creates a tempo. Everything that we do when we're writing a script is about creating a tempo for the story. So Scott McCloud very classically said, the more panels you add to a page, the slower time moves. The less panels, the quicker time moves. My standard rule for when I'm writing my own stuff is that any action scene has to be 4 panels or less, unless there's a specific thing happening. But any dialogue scene can be anywhere from like 5 to 10 to 12, as many panels as you need in order to tell that story and slow down the moments of time for that story that you need.
Well, I kind of liked this, but I also kind of thought that if the writer wanted to, the writer could have used this space to truly explain the rule of the story, right? The rule of the story was, no matter how much time you spend inside, right? You said the time dilation. You lost me there. What was that again? Time dilation.
The cadence and the time. Yeah, the time. Well, the whole concept behind the story is that he's supposed to be compressing all this extra time that he doesn't have to do the things that he wants to do for himself, so that he can spend time, or she rather, so she can spend time with her family.
No, I was impressed that there was a word for this. I didn't.
Oh yeah, time dilation.
I was like, "There's a word for this." Okay, so anyway, explaining the rules of the time dilation machine, I felt like this was an opportunity, right? Like, we stretched this moment here, and I'm not sure why. Like, of the moment where you go no dialogue, you're expecting the actor or the director, in your case, to derive meaning from this, and I wasn't sure what meaning the writer wanted from this. At this point, right. Now I'll get it as I go through the story, because only 8 pages.
But there is a way. But again, there is a way that you could do that, and I think, like, I'm looking at it now, and I'm thinking one of the ways that you can do that, like with panel 3 and 4, you've got Morgan lying down on the couch with his eyes closed. But instead of having it directly, I would probably have it as a profile shot where Morgan is kind of leaning back, his eyes closed. And then the next panel is him in the same position, but looking towards the camera. And then on page 4, we go to page 4.
By the way, I should say we are brutal as reviewers, but this is in part because we want these writers to be ready for the next layer of work. I should note that like if the author David Marino's heart is breaking right now, know that it's a pretty good story. I mean, to be honest with you, it's a pretty good story. So don't be heartbroken, David. We're starting from it's pretty good. Here's how it can be better, right, Jamal?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, because I feel like my heart would be breaking right now, but we're starting. It's good, David. You're in good hands with Jamal.
Well, I think part of it also is that the page 3 is supposed to set up this idea that he doesn't really know what he's supposed to be doing in the time in yet. So he's just kind of sitting there, kind of, twiddling his thumbs, because that's the first thing you can think of is, I have a little bit of breathing space. Let me, sit down and chill. But then we cut to page 4 where we see him going home. Mm-hmm. And and again, I like the son's birthday thing. The only thing that I would do, and this is more of an artistic note, less than a note to Dave, is that I would, on panel 2, I would probably have Sam already coming towards Dave, or so not towards Morgan. I'm mixing up names. Sorry, everybody. Coming towards Morgan as she's walking through the door into the threshold. So there's less of a space between, that panel and Sam reaching his hand in the bag. It's already in motion. That's more of an artist thing. That's something that, I would do. Which is fine. That's fine. So we go to page 5. Now, here's the thing that sort of got me, and I actually wrote this down. I felt like there was something missing from all of this. And I felt like what was missing is that there's a timer that happens when Morgan goes into the time in. And I felt like that timer needed to be more present throughout the story. The idea that timer should always be omnipresent, even in the beginning. So you go back to page 3. You go back to page 3. That's the first time where we should see the timer counting down Morgan's time in the living room. So we always had that connection of that timer. So every time on page 5, when Morgan is talking to her coworkers, we see that timer in the panel. Or not when you're talking to the coworkers, but whenever she's in the chamber, you see that timer in the panel counting down. The same way that you have later in the story. So you're already establishing this idea.
This is the one place where, and I didn't think of it until you said it. I'm asking, is this a moment where the writer could have asked for a watch face and then have each of these as radial parts of it, reinforcing time and a clock? Because this whole thing is about how you spend your time.
Right.
And this is the one place where now that you said that, it hits me. By the way, the timer idea, it's genius because it everybody can relate to it. It translates in every language. But I look at that and I go, is that the place for the special effect? Because the Z pattern, clever, but I didn't know what the purpose of it. This is all about time. What are your? Am I thinking too much into it?
No. Because he's already got. If you go to page 7, he's already got it set up. So you just extend it. You extend that idea, and then that becomes the thread that runs through the entire narrative. Wow. Is that timer is constantly counting down.
Wow. No, that's awesome. Now, so I'm looking at 5. I thought 5 was good. I think David will probably want to cut. David will want to trim some of this dialogue.
Probably.
In my mind, like surgically, because there are, with 8 panels, that's a lot of word balloons. You want to, get as much out.
Well, even if he doesn't. Well, yeah, I would probably cut one or two, but or another way to do it, because you got 8 panels. It's a little bit tight. You could go in a little tighter with some of the stuff. Like, you don't need him typing at a desk on a laptop. You can cut that. You can have him working out. You can have him reading. You can have him sitting on the couch eating snacks. You have, but again, as long as that timer motif is omnipresent there. And, once we get to page 6, and the attendance, like, you're taking more timeouts than
You want to go to
football.
6, Aaron?
Yeah, you're taking more timeouts than the football team. You don't have to be reminded that, there's this timer happening because we've seen it through the entire story.
Well, I like where it was going. You could kind of see where it's going, and then, if in my mind, it felt like, okay, David, if you can pull this off and have a good O. Henry twist at the end. By the way, the panel grid, kind of Keith Giffenish, Bendis, right? Like that sort of.
Right.
I like that. I think that's good. I think that's a great way to put a lot of information in a small amount of space, and it's visually fun for the reader, and I don't know if it's fun for the artist drawing a bunch of faces, but I always like that when Giffen did it or when Bendis did it.
Yeah. So, okay, so we get to page 7, which is where that note came in. So you have this. Now, the other problem that I had with this page. Okay, so if the page was as it is, all you would see is this, this countdown session, which is boring. It really is. Visually, it doesn't say anything. I felt like if you kept, again, going back to the whole timer motif, but you superimpose that timer the same way as you do on the other scenes where he's doing different things. Like, and it's still counting down, and he's spending more, and you see him visually aging. Even if slightly, you give that kind of indication.
Until you said it, it didn't even really dawn on me that he was just using one whole page just to show a series of timers, and you want to show how that time is used.
Right.
And then you could have like you said, like a little info box.
Mm-hmm.
He's playing frisbee and whatever. Now, what kind of threw me a little bit was, and I know we're doing a little prelude to 8. If he was 1 day, 1 week, 6 hours, 1 hour, we're talking about 2 weeks of time.
Mm-hmm.
When we next see Morgan, she's much older. Right. Like, and that was where I was like, wait a minute, what happened? And I understand this is session 27, session 45, session 60, but it's making me do a lot of thinking. Right. Like, I'm going, wait, all right. So if you go to page 8, Aaron, go ahead. You go first, Jamal.
So yeah, it's again, and I think I kind of see where you're going. It's a nice idea. I don't understand just from it. This is the editor in me going, Morgan has aged 30 years in the space of 2 weeks, and her family has said absolutely nothing about it.
Yeah.
They're not freaking out at all.
Yeah.
Clearly there is an issue going on.
There's something she needs to get that checked out.
Yes, exactly. That honestly, that kind of took me out of it a little bit. It's I understood what Dave was going for. It's just, I could understand if the aging were a little bit more subtle. I think, I guess Kyle Rose is going to be the artist on this.
Yeah, Kyle's great, man.
I think if Kyle could, less, Jessica Tandy and a little bit more, Meryl Streep-ish, or Michelle Pfeiffer right now, little gray, couple of crow's feet, there's, show some clear aging visually, but you don't want her to be like hunched over and carrying a cane. I mean, I think that's a little. I mean, it's an oversell.
Well,
Yeah.
so when I reread it I was like, okay, did I get so number one, thanks for making the time. Home run dialogue. I was like, that's awesome. Last part, going back into the chamber, doors closing. This is where I felt like ending with the credits takes away from the impact of
Mhm.
that final action. Close the door in the chamber, closing, click, end, I felt was stronger,
I
right?
would agree. I would agree when you say it like that. I would definitely agree with you.
Yeah. So then thanks for making the time. I love it. Get a little chill up the back of my neck. However, I don't know why Morgan did this. She aged 30 years from this kid being 10 to 11. Why can't she age with this kid? What's going to happen between 11 and 12? Another 30 years? Like, I feel bad for the kid. Kid's like, slow down, mom.
But this is cool. But this is clearly an addiction. Also, like keeps going back over and over again.
Yeah.
I mean, parents know what it's like to be crunched for time, but still, I don't think I would want to spend all my time in a time dilation chamber. Aging myself out between birthdays. I mean, it seems a little bit much. That's just me.
Yeah. So by 12, like, things are looking pretty grim for Morgan. So, but I think you're right. It is kind of an addiction, but I think he has something here. I think he has something that is worth salvaging.
Mhm.
And I think the element that he might want to rethink is, Morgan's, as you said, I think you're right, is an addiction. And even the attendant said it's like a football, more than a football team. And I was like, okay, that was a good piece of juxtaposition to tell. Even the attendant thinks this is an awful lot. But I think he can rescue this by thinking, okay, does she just want to stretch out one or two moments, not necessarily age 30 years, but find a couple of key moments? And maybe it's not just about Sam. Maybe it's about um, her husband passed away or her father passes away and she wants more time with that moment
Mm.
or something. Like, I want to have a reason for why she's doing this, because she has aged herself out in a
Right.
way that actually isn't to anybody's greater benefit, especially Sam, who,
Right.
if she ages normally, she'll be gone much sooner out of his
Well,
life.
I also think that uh, another way that this could be saved. I'm not saying saved like it's in a bad way at all. It's not. It's a strong story.
Mhm.
My suggestion would be it needs more setup. It needs at least a page of setup. We need to see Morgan at work. Frazzled. Maybe on the phone with her wife, like saying, I'll try to make it. I'll try to get there on time. I'm just, I'm overwhelmed. And then maybe her coworker who's suggesting all this stuff to her later in the story is the one who suggests the time in.
Ah,
Hey, I went to this place. I was able to, get like an extra 6 hours out of my day and not even miss dinner. You should go check it out. So
like total,
something
it's a
like
little
that.
bit of Total Recall, right?
Yeah,
Like, see
exactly,
this thing.
exactly.
Um, and Aaron asked, is this taking this to a dark place? I think it could. And of course, as readers, we're wondering about, where David wanted to take us. And I
Mhm.
think that, again, I think he's got the kernel of something, but like you said, maybe do that shift
Right,
of, I wish I had more time. Well, you can
right.
have more time.
Yeah, it pushes it more into that sort of like Twilight Zone Outer Limits kind of area where it's less horror because this is an ending like this is just like you said, by the time Sam's 12, Morgan's gonna be in a wheelchair slurping down applesauce. So
But yeah, that's the thing. Like, did he want a horror ending? I don't think so. It felt like
no.
he wanted more of a chill up the back of your neck. And I felt like thanks for making the time gives me that chill. I think it's a great line of dialogue.
Mhm.
And I like that closing the door. She's going to do it one more time. But I
Right,
think you're onto something where the coworker says you can have more time. And then she gets that time,
right.
because then he can lose some of the I don't know, the setup the dressing to the setup in the early
Well,
pages.
if he adds like that one page where you set up the story, you don't even need, okay, for example, you don't even need panel 1. You could start with her standing in front of the time in on page 1, and that'll be your establishing shot. If you want to make that a big establishing shot, then go ahead, but you don't even need that setup because she's already her coworker goes, "Hey, I know this place," and then we cut to page, what will end up being page 2, and panel 2 becomes your panel 1.
That's a great idea. So with what we're looking at page 1 is, I think Dave is on the board. It's a great opportunity to drop a message to talk. Oh, okay, there you go.
That is actually a really good point as well.
So one of the things that Twilight Zone stories endings are perfect. Yeah, I agree. Page 1 has no dialogue. This is an opportunity for flashback dialogue. Morgan, you can have more time. You could go, you can have more time. You can have more time. You can have
But
more
even
time.
if you want that one, like the panel 1 on page 1, even you move that, you keep that first panel, and then you make the rest of the page a flashback of her talking to her coworker, and then panels 2, 3, and 4 on page 1 become page 2 of the story. And then you can actually probably cut out page 3 and then go immediately, because you cut out part of page. Actually, you know what? You can keep part of page 3 where she's sitting in the living room setting, but you cut some of page 2. You keep panel 1 of page 2. You keep panel 3, what will end up being panel 3 of page 2, where they go into the elevator, they're coming out of the elevator. You cut that bit of them going down the elevator, because you don't need that. It's not necessary. And then you have that establishing shot, and then, or you move the establishing shot that I added to page 2 in my layout to page 3, and then then you can cut to the rest of the story as is and build from there.
Yeah, and I like that, because sometimes as a writer I don't know where the places to cut are, and once you start to describe that, then I realize, okay, you've just shifted everything up. Now I have a little bit more room. Are you joining us, Erin? Or are we running? We're running late.
We are running up at 8. It's 8:50, just about.
All right, so let us move on.
Time flies.
Time flies.
Script review. I didn't want to interrupt you. You had a lot of good information there.
No, Erin, thank you so much. Erin, would you throw up the thumbnail that Jamal created? It is for this page, just so everybody's aware. If you're following along, you can get PDF on the website. Erin's going to pull up a thumbnail that Jamal sketched out of how you would reinterpret that page. And again, everyone, if you go to comicbookschool.com, there's a PDF if you need to follow along. This is your thumbnail. Yes. What were you doing here, Jamal?
Well, like I was saying before, I didn't think that the Z formation thing that Dave wanted to do was really working for me visually. I just felt like it would have been too confusing. So I broke up what started out in the script as panel 1, and I broke it into 4 panels instead. So you have the first panel where Morgan meets the attendant for the first time. Panel 2, where Morgan and the attendant are walking to the elevator. Panel 3, they're going down in the elevator. Panel 4, they're going to the room for the first time. And this was the big change, which was his panels 5 and 6. So panel 5, you have Morgan running her finger down the menu, and then you have an establishing shot of this living room setting where she's going to be sitting. Instead of going straight into it in panel 3, you establish, quote unquote, you show where this is going to take place. The thing about doing an establishing shot is that if you put all the elements of this space into your establishing shot, you don't even have to redraw it or even reference it, because you want to give the reader an idea of where things are taking place. So you make it as complete as possible, and then you can move on and do everything else.
What I love about what you've illustrated here, Jamal, and I'm seeing the juxtaposition of the final panel of a living room, which is very sedate
Mhm.
and very comforting, and the sci-fi element of how they get there. Right,
Right.
like that's a real cool sci-fi. And then she presses a button and goes into something that just looks like a living room.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a cool storytelling element, and it's very clear here. Like I have no doubt where my eye is supposed to go.
Well, yeah, that's the key. I mean, one of the things that I used to teach my students when I taught at the Start Art Students League is that you want one of the things that I learned when I was working in animation is character direction. And the idea behind character direction is that your lead character always comes in from the left-hand side of the page and always corresponds to characters on the right-hand side of the page. So they're always in opposition to each other. You're creating a sense of conflict, whether it's a conversation or a fight, because your lead character is always coming in from the left, and all the antagonists are coming in from the right hand side of the page. And because we are Western readers particularly read from left to right, that's how our natural our eye flows. And then it's the same thing is where the all the artwork is the same thing. You want to be able to lead the eye from the left hand side of the first panel to the second panel to the third panel to the fourth panel down to the fifth panel and across to the sixth panel, and then whatever happens in the sixth panel needs to be able to lead the reader's eye to the page that follows it.
You achieve the Z pattern in this page, but just in a subtle way. Top left to right, angle down to panel 2, across, angle down to panel 5, across to 6, and then off the page. You do that automatically with the way you've controlled the eye. Now, not everybody knows how to control the eye, and I think it is worth noting. Can you just give the students a little note what the 1s and 2s are?
Okay, so those are the dialogue as Dave had it listed in the script. So if I were the editor and I needed to hand the pages off to a letterer, I would do the balloon placement for all the lettering on a separate Xerox. So usually what you do is all the bits of dialogue are numbered. All the captions are usually numbered as well. So they're numbered in numerical order. So it makes it easier for the letterer to pull whatever pieces of dialogue he needs, pop it into Illustrator and do what he needs to do with it. If everything's numbered the same way, it becomes very confusing for them.
Yeah, and it also tells you how much dialogue there will be. So how much space, negative space you're leaving, right? Like
absolutely. And that's an artist. That's as an artist, you need to know how much space you're giving your letterer. I try to give at least a third of each panel, like the upper third of each panel, or at least a big enough portion of each panel so that the letterer can have space to do their thing. But balloon placement is it's one of those things that not everybody is able to do. You have to learn how to do it. And I would talk to some letterers personally. I would say, and I just started teaching myself how to letter. Just not that I want to be a professional letterer, but I want to know again, this goes with my overall ideal towards education, which is I want to know what it takes to do the job so that I'm better informed to discuss with my creative team what I would like for them to do.
Having written Molly Danger, did that change the way you approached art, particularly when you're working with a strong writer like Tom Peyer?
Oh yeah, no, it gave me, so working on Molly Danger and putting Molly Danger together, it just gave me so much more respect for everything everybody else does. It really did. You don't, and again, the same thing with teaching myself to color in Photoshop and trying to teach myself how to letter. If you don't know the jobs, you can't complain about the jobs. I'm decent at a lot of different things, and I have so much respect for people who are masters of their craft. And I want to show my respect for that at the same time. Like, I respect what my partners do. I respect the skill and the talent and the fortitude, because this business is not easy to be in at all by any stretch of the imagination. You have to be, tough as nails to stay in for as long as we manage to stay in. So,
Well, well, let me be respectful of your time. A couple things to note. Ari Rubin. Oh, he has a question. He actually had reminded me of something. Do you want to read the question? As an artist, how much direction do you want regarding specific panel layout? Which panel should be bigger, smaller? Specific patterns such as grids, columns, or the Z shape in this script, Jamal?
It depends. If there's something very specific that the writer wants to do, then I will do my best to accommodate him. But occasionally it is not possible. So I don't need to be told, this panel has to be exactly this size, or this panel has to be exactly this size. You have to remember that, especially, with mainstream comics, in particular, it's a collaborative process. You're a team. You have to be a little bit flexible. The writer has to be flexible. The penciler has to be flexible. The inker has to be flexible. The colorist has to be flexible. Letterer, editor, production. There's a certain amount of give and take with everything. So I don't necessarily need a bolt by bolt breakdown. But at the same time, somebody like Tom, who writes a full script, but gives me just enough panel direction and is flexible enough, if I come to him with an idea for something, and he'll incorporate it, or he'll just say, no, go for it, I like your idea better. Yeah.
Well, as a writer, I try to keep it balanced.
Mm-hmm.
I recognize that you're the visual storyteller, but if there is something specific, like, David did a really good job of articulating certain things that he really wanted to see. And I thought he was very judicious with his description. He didn't over describe, he didn't under describe. And I thought that was good. I like that he didn't try to do your job completely.
Right. I mean, I've been in those positions too, where, I've worked with writers who were just way too overbearing, and it's not a fun process.
They give you the Alan Moore script.
Oh my god. I not that bad. But I've been in all sorts of different situations. I've done Marvel style scripts. I've done, traditional full scripts. I've, worked with nothing but like a 2-page outline. It really depends on the writer. Some people are more flexible than others. When working on black and on white, we were doing it Marvel style. So, a lot of the storytelling was up to me. There was only one instance when we were working on black where we were doing the issue 6, and I get this breakdown, and this, like, we raised so much money on Kickstarter, we incorporated this 20-page fight scene in the end of the issue, and Kwanzaa had this outline where everybody's got these like power moves going on, and everybody's got a moment, and I started breaking it down, and then I realized, no, there's no way. So I sent him and Sarah emails like, look, guys, this isn't going to happen like this. There's no room. We'd have to add like another 10 pages to it, the way that you have it set up. Let's see, what comes first? Keeping the story interesting, funky on the page, or keeping clarity intact? Plot is key. Characters drive plot. It's more important to keep the story intact than making it funky.
Because if you find a chance to make it funky, you'll make it funky, right?
Exactly.
All right, so that's all the time we have for questions. I got some little bit of housekeeping. By the way, that was Chris. He won an award for best story. So, all right. So, worth noting. Thank you very much to David Marino for being willing to open himself up to public criticism.
Yes, bravo,
David. You're doing a great job, and one of the reasons David was chosen because he is so active on our message boards. We want to reward our community. We are building a community, and what we want people to know, Jamal, is that they're going to continue the conversation about tonight in our message boards.
Cool.
People will see the links. We will also be having you join us again for a follow-up. We will be having you and Tom Pyre from Ahoy Comics, and I think that's going to be super exciting. You can't
Get
see
ready
it there.
to laugh.
Yeah, April 20th. Yeah, Tom's a very funny guy. So April 20th, we'll have the both of you on. We'll be talking about publishing and editing and whatever else you guys feel like discussing. But ultimately, we want the community to know that they can post questions in advance that you guys they'll put in front of you. We don't know if you'll answer them, but we'll put the questions in front of you. And where can we find you, Jamal? Where are the places where you're located, where people can follow or find you?
I am on Twitter at Jamal Igle, as it says over there. Although it's private right now because Snyder fans. But
and you have a website.
I do have a website. It is jamaligle.com. You can email me from there, and I will answer your email because what else have I got to do other than draw comic books and listen to political radio?
And what do you have coming out that people should be looking for? And or before you answer, remember, Comic Book School community, people do this for us. They give us free advice. You don't pay for these classes. The way you say thank you is buying the books that are out on the stands. With that in mind, what do you got coming out?
Okay, so The Wrong Earth, Night and Day. The first 3 issues are in stores right now. Issue 4 will be out very, very soon. And White #1 from Black Mass Studios will also be out this month. So I will have 2 books on the stand also. And I think I've got like a couple little things in some DC books that came out a while ago. So you guys can go pick those up too. But
yeah, The Wrong Earth is a hoot, man. I mean, it's one
of my favorite stories.
Yeah, it was. I knew Tom Pyre from years ago, and I was like, well, let's give it a shot as Jamal. It's fantastic, and it is really a hoot. And you guys did a great job. Black was a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to White. And again, thank you for giving us your time and your knowledge and being so generous and paying it forward, Jamal. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for your friendship, your guidance over the years, and for sharing so generously with our community.
It's my pleasure, man. Comic Book School, thank you for having me. I will see you guys next week.
We will see you in a week. Thank you very much, Jamal. Good night, everybody. And Aaron, thank you so much for engineering this. You did an awesome job. You are awesome. You did a great job.
Thanks. One side note, we do have office hours on Friday. The link will be up just after this link closes. So if you do have general questions about Comic Book School, the 8-page challenge, great guests like Jamal and others that we will have coming up, check us out on this live stream. Same place, same channel, same buddy on Friday.
Wait, tell them the slogan. This is my favorite thing, Aaron.
If you have questions, we've got Buddy.
All right. Good night, everybody. We'll see you in a week, Jamal.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Bye now.